Thank you, Angelica. Singing into the Sacred Heart, I think all of us have had those times when we felt weary and lost, and we want our lives to change. We want to feel that we are enfolded by love, by the Sacred Heart of the Divine. And we're going to be talking about that as part of our talk today. And so we're celebrating Palm Sunday with a little bit of fun by calling my talk Dance with the Donkey. So, during the time of Jesus, many of his followers believed that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem to establish a new kingdom on earth. And when he rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, his followers cut palm leaves and covered the pathway to honor him, right? And so the feeling of excitement, it must have been similar to those thousands of screaming fans that were at John F. Kennedy Airport in 1964 when the Beatles arrived for the first time in America. And the excitement continued to build when the Beatles were performing on the Ed Sullivan Show. I mean, it was just, everybody was just, this was a new world, right? And that's the way they felt when Jesus was coming into Jerusalem, even though he was riding on a donkey. And so they brought all of the palm leaves, and this was a great way to honor this new leader. But Jesus wanted everyone, including his followers and the ruling parties, to know that he came in peace, right? Now, in ancient Middle Eastern countries, leaders rode in on horses when they went to war. But when they chose to ride a donkey, it symbolically meant that they came in peace, right? And so also the name Jerusalem means habitation of peace. Consequently, Jesus chose to ride on a donkey, and he conveyed the message that he came in peace, and thereby transformed the world. Jesus was guiding the world towards an inner transformation of the spirit, rather than fighting for an outer change by war or physical force. This disappointed some of his followers, but Jesus knew that the only an inner spiritual transformation would be lasting. When you change by force, by war, we're seeing in Ukraine, that you have to maintain it by force. It's really where we are in our hearts, where we are in line with peace, in that inner divine is what is manifesting in our lives. That is what's lasting. So by celebrating Palm Sunday and Easter next week, people are seeking a symbolic, personal, inner spiritual transformation. Growth requires, however, going beyond our comfort zone. This is a process of creative discovery that requires us to leave what is known, including our limitations, and venture out into that unknown. Now, several different religions are celebrating holidays with related meanings over the next few weeks. Passover this year begins with a Seder on Friday, April 15th, and continues until Saturday, April 23rd. It commemorates when the Israelites were liberated from slavery in Egypt. Now, as described in the book of Exodus, Moses had warned Pharaoh that a series of plagues would befall Egypt unless Pharaoh let the Israelites leave Egypt. But Pharaoh did not heed the warnings. And so the plagues continued until the last plague, when the angel of death came and visited every home and killed the firstborn son. Quite a disastrous plague. And so the Jewish families were spared, because they anointed their doorways with lamb's blood. Their homes were passed over, thus Passover. Now, a distraught Pharaoh, grieving over the loss of his firstborn son, let the Jews leave, at least initially. And so the Jews left everything that they knew in haste, and then wandered over the desert for 40 years until they finally found their new home, and they came into alignment with that divine inner guide. They were lost in the desert. Now, Ramadan celebrates the month when Muslims believe that the Quran, their sacred text, was revealed to Muhammad. In 2022, Ramadan started on April 2nd, and it will continue until May 2nd, a whole month. During the entire month, Muslims fast every day from sunrise to sunset. So they have to get up early to eat, and then they have a big feast at the end of the day. They also refrain from gossiping, arguing, and lying. All right, so it's a complete fast. from anything that's not holy. And it's a time for prayer, sacred study, self-reflection, and spiritual growth. And ultimately, the Muslims are seeking a higher awareness, a constant awareness of God in their lives. Can we fast from our own beliefs, prejudices, and fears, and create room for inspiration and expressing our inner divine self, right, as our true self? Right? Now, this morning, I want to focus more closely on Palm Sunday, the significance of Jesus riding a donkey into Jerusalem at the beginning of the Christian Holy Week that culminates with Easter. Now, besides being a symbol of peace, another common characterization of donkeys is that they are stubborn. Right? Now, according to the University of Edinburgh, however, donkeys are more stoic than horses and less are easily started, and they prefer to move slowly without being rushed along. Now, when horses encounter an unknown and fearful situation, they typically will startle and they'll bolt from the situation, from the scene, and carrying their rider with them. Donkeys, on the other hand, they tend to just freeze, and they assess the situation before they do anything. And don't ask them to move before they know where they're going and where it's going to be safe. Now, this is an asset if the rider wants the donkey to carry them down a rocky and unstable hillside. You want that donkey to be careful. But it's a sign of stubbornness if the rider wants to override the donkey's fear and run away in haste. So when we are challenged to grow and explore greater possibilities in our life, our path often takes us out of our comfort zone, just like the donkeys being taken out of their comfort zone. So we have a similar natural tendency. We resist taking a new path that leads to unknown encounters, and we stick with the safer and well-trodden path. Right? We don't know whether the unknown people and conditions that we're going to encounter, are they going to be friendly and welcoming? Or will they be threatening and antagonistic, or just hard to figure out? We don't know, right? Will we be called into battle with unforeseen demons? Maybe we should resist the new people or the situations that ask us to respond in new ways. We want to just stay the way we've always been. Or should we just freeze until we figure out what to do? Or should we automatically just battle our way through and move forward, regardless of what we oppose and find opposing us? Now, in the book A New Design for Living, that Michael read from this morning, in another section, Ernest Holmes says, "You feel a need to get out of your well-worn rut and move into a fuller, richer enjoyment of life. What can be done about establishing a new design for living? In your personal experience, there's two things. First, there must be a willingness and desire to cut yourself loose from undesirable things of the past. All right? They're undesirable, so let go. Second, you will need to enlarge your viewpoint, to develop an eagerness to encounter new ideas, evaluate them, and assimilate those which you can best use and adapt for your purposes and requirements." So it's an exploration. We have to evaluate what is there in the new conditions, and is it something that we want? And so thought can be creative of our goal, and it can also be productive of things that we do not desire, for all thought is created. It's one of the famous quotes from Ernest Holmes. And now think about this. Thought, when we have our thoughts, they go into the law, and the law always says yes. And if we put good stuff in there, we get good stuff out, manifesting. If we put false beliefs or limiting beliefs in, we get something that matches that as well. So we get to choose, all right? But whatever we choose, that's what is created. Now, we can never limit the nature of the infinite, but we can limit our experience of it by our limited concept of it. Reading again from the book, A New Design for Living, The limitations we find encircling us have but one source. They spring from our thought. They are the result of our negative habitual thought patterns, conscious or tucked away in the subconscious, which may have been instigated by our past experiences, right? We're repeating the past, or our blind acceptance of what may now appear to be the wrong ideas and concepts of others. Maybe it's from somebody we thought we could trust, like our parents. We always find that there's some things that our parents did the best they could, but hopefully we try and improve with each generation, right? Now, we then need to strike out boldly in creating our new design for living. And as Michael read this morning, we will never find the time. We're going to have to take the time. If anything is to be done at all, now, right now, is the time to start. Right? So, someone who is always willing to start a new design for his life is Tiger Woods. And Tiger is playing in the Masters Golf Tournament in Augusta, Georgia. He's playing for golf for the first time in a tournament in 16 months. Because that was after he was in a car accident that almost killed him. And it's amazing that he's walking, much less playing golf, and that he's alive. So after many surgeries and much physical therapy, and despite dealing with pain every day, he's back doing what he loves the most, playing golf. Right? Now yesterday, Tiger put out this tweet. Never give up. Always chase after your dreams. I fight each and every day. Each and every day is a challenge. Each and every day presents its own challenges for all of us. I wake up and let's start the fight all over again. All right? And that's why he's there. He's back. And playing reasonable. He's a master, but, not the Tiger when he was 21, when he won the first time, but he's definitely back. So how do we deal with our own resistance and limitations when we encountered it? So the first step is we have to notice it. Right? If we don't see what we're doing to limit ourselves, we can't change it. And then secondly, we need to create a new pattern. Now, many of these patterns are deeply entrenched because we've done them for our whole lives. Maybe our parents did them and their parents. It's something that's carried down. We call this race consciousness, or the collective consciousness of what everything that's ever been done in the past goes into this collective consciousness. And that's the default unless we choose something different. So some things we've learned are strict rules about how to survive, how to love, how to earn a living, how men are supposed to treat women and women are supposed to treat men. Should we trust or not trust other people? Some things are healthy. Other things are abusive or physically or emotionally or limiting. So how do we discover a new path forward? Well, one way is we can approach it with a resistance and kicking and screaming down that path of transformation, right? And I get the image of a donkey that doesn't want to go where we want it to go, and it's kicking and resisting and very loud, noisy, big commotion, and everybody will know that this donkey is not going to go where you want it to go, right? And so they don't want to go where they think they should be fearful. They don't want to get into danger, right? They're protecting themselves and their rider, right? And so how do we calm the donkey when we think it's something that is coming from a divine intention and calling? So I also remember there was someone in my family had a panic attack, and this is much like this chaotic scene created by a donkey. And so, but the panic attack, they were out driving themselves in their car, and it was so difficult, debilitating, that they had to actually pull the car over to the side of the road and call for help. And so I had to drive over and be with them. They were blinded by fear. There was fear of being alone, unable to move forward or backward, do anything, and just to be. I mean, at least they could call me. I was grateful of that. And for them, it was hard to remember in that moment that they were loved, except that they were loved just as they are, without losing their identity. They didn't need to live up to anyone else's expectations or be something better. They had to be themselves. And that is how God created them to be. When we don't know who we are, it's really hard to filter out all of the influences of the world, what we see is going on, although that might be coming out of our limitation or someone else's ideas of limitation, and we have these influences of other people, and so sometimes people will just shut out all other people because they want to find themselves in the midst of all of it, right? And that's pretty hard when you're the one that's being shut out, but that's their survival approach. And so they blindly shut out everyone because it looks scary and it looks like it's against them. And they can't distinguish the good and from the bad. So part of the healing then is to finding that security of knowing who we are, of that we are part of the one life that is God, that we are beloved of God, and yet we are still ourselves. We are an individualization of God, right? We are perfect just as we are. God, we are a part of God, inseparable from God, and yet we are individual, unique in many ways. We know that we are loved beyond measure, just as we are, and that is a very reassuring, calming experience, and knowing that we are protected by the power and presence of God that is within us and around us everywhere, as long as we open up to that power and protection. And this is where we find our solid footing, just like the donkey on that rocky slope. And this is when we can see our path. We can feel that ground beneath us and move forward with an inner calm confidence, right? In the Science of Mind textbook, Ernest Holmes says that the whole purpose of Science of Mind is to reconcile the apparent separation of the spiritual world, which must be perfect, with the material world, which appears imperfect. This is why we are taught to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Right? And from the Bible in Romans 12:2, it says, "And be ye not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God." So we prove it by having it manifest. When we choose to follow the divine guidance, we choose those choices that we are guided to choose, then that's what manifests that heaven on earth that we are seeking, right? Someone who kept that clarity through all of the outside appearances for her whole life is a woman named Ketanji Brown Jackson. And she was, as you probably know, she was just appointed the first black woman to the American Supreme Court. It took, as she said in her talk, it only took 152 appointments to finally get to the first black woman. But she's there. And she's competent, and she's got the background. And she was amazing as she went through the confirmation hearings, regardless of what was thrown up at her and the way they tried to trip her up. She was there with the knowledge that she needed, with the even-handedness, with the calmness, and with that inner conviction of spirit that she was in the right place at the right time. She was ready. I went through something similar. I was a woman engineer before I became a minister, and I went through that same thing. There were only 2 women engineers in my civil engineering class when I graduated. Now there's many women approaching even with the men. But we start at the beginning, and we have to have that vision of knowing who we are and trusting that we will be supported from within, even when we're not supported from without. And eventually the external support will come, but we keep that from within. We need to know who we are and why we are here. We need to also identify in our contemplation and our prayer who other people are and why they are here, right? And accept them as they are. We're all divine creations. We're all part of that one life as God, regardless of whatever somebody might be doing at the time. And it can get pretty crazy and make me angry. But it is a part of God. And so within their heart of hearts, there is God. that we can always speak to that truth. And knowing this can transform our lives and the world. When we stand up for that divine peace as the strongest power in the world, that divine quality that we seek to be manifest. Ernest Holmes has a wonderful quote that he talks about that says, "We should have a deep sense of calm and peace, an abiding faith and trust in the universe. This is the essence of faith, the beauty of religion at its best, really." So if we learn to dance with the donkey and all of our challenges in our life, whether they're the fun ones and the difficult ones and what have you, we can follow the path that Jesus showed us. He proceeded in peace as he came into Jerusalem, carefully assessing the situation and discerning the divine intention for him that day. Right? He was listening within. And rather than being short-sighted and stubborn and following, having his ego become this warrior lord, Jesus persistently moved forward in peace on his divine path. Right? He took time to discover and understand the unknown rather than ignoring or avoiding challenges. As he danced with the donkey, he let his resistance fade away and he surrendered to what was. Right? This opened the path to divine wisdom and revealed a new way forward to inner peace and transformation for us all. Inner stability starts with the phrase sometimes, "Be still and know that I am God." Be still and know that I am God, the God within us. We do not find God outside of ourselves, and when we're beseeching God and trying to find, talking to a higher God that has a long beard, and we don't talk about that in Science of Mind. We look at God that's within us and has always been there, and we are awakening to that divine presence, right? The power and presence of God is always within our hearts, waiting for us to become aware of who we are. And in life's continuum, we have both sacred moments of discovery and dark nights of the soul. But the valleys of death and desperation they're meant to be passed through and not lived in there. Don't take up residence. They are on our path forward. They're an opportunity for us to learn more about who we are, about the divine. But we're spiritual beings having a human existence and not the other way around. Right? It is all, every occurrence is an opportunity for us to grow and to understand more about God and who we are as a divine creation. Right? God is always there. It will never fail. Jesus, the great teacher, showed us how to deal with our challenges. So rather than deny, fight, or abandon his donkey, Jesus rode on the donkey, and he connected with that donkey and guided it so that it felt safe and could move forward. They could move forward together. And when we accept what is, we are free to dance with what it is and just let it all out and let that divine being within us express itself in all of its fullness and love and wonder and creativity, right? The challenges or people issues in our lives become part of that creative dance in our life, not reasons to give up or to despair. Now we have lots of tools to help us move through the valleys and to use these challenging experiences as growth experiences. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but we want to release our resistance and surrender to the love and the power and the support of God within us. We have the power of love, of forgiveness. We can benefit by being willing to be inspired and divinely guided. We have to be willing to listen, right? And we learn to go beyond our limitations that we have set for ourselves and realize that we are the ones that have set those limitations because God is infinite, unlimited, right? And then on the other hand, it takes courage and curiosity to explore your dreams and your uniqueness, to be uniquely yourself. Toni Morrison said, "If you want to fly, You must give up the things that weigh you down, right? Our limitations, the things that keep us small. Now, relationships are a great example of how to go beyond our old patterns and limitations. Now, in any relationship, there's inevitably conflict because we are not perfect clones of each other. How are we going to move beyond this conflict? Two people are a little different and it's never going to quite match. But they say that two heads are better than one, right? So how do we take advantage of that? So first, we begin by remembering that all people are part of that one life that is God, including me and you and all people, right? Second, there must be physical safety before the two people can have a meaningful and equitable conversation about the issue. So if there is not physical safety, then you need to put yourself in a safe place, perhaps, rather than having a conversation, right? But when there is safety, when both people are there dedicated to the relationship and that finding that we relationship together as part of spirit, well, then when there's conflict, they can share with each other what is bothering them. And so, but if we never say anything, and our resentments are based on unenforceable expectations or unstated requests or something that we're hiding, the other person has no way to know what we desire. They have no way to understand our needs and perspectives or to change their own expectations and actions unless they share, hopefully before things blow up, right? Now, ghosting, which means to totally cut off communication without warning or explanation, is a dysfunctional way of treating other people, which seems to have become much more popular with the advent of the cancel culture and during COVID, when we have been living in relative social isolation. People have, their social skills have gotten a little rusty, I think, perhaps. So ghosting, however, locks both people into lasting anger, hurt, and dismay without any way to bring the issues to the surface that perhaps could be resolved quite easily if each knew what the other was thinking or what the other needed. Or knew, oh, is that all you want? Well, that's easy. I can easily do that for you. I would love to do that for you. But if you don't ask, you don't know. There's no way to clear the air and move forward. It's important that important information that is necessary for understanding cannot be shared if one party is ghosting the other. Now, when people do listen and share with each other, the power and presence of the one divine presence can guide them to understand each other's perspectives and find options that serve them both. And this is true whether the two people decide to stay together or go their separate ways. Right? Now, an example of this is in my own family with Michael and I. We're doing some visioning together so that we can start to resolve an impasse over how are we going to create our new home together in Tahoe's. Not all of our belongings are going to fit into our smaller house. So what do we keep and what do we give away? Right? It's not just one person's not going to decide. We've got to decide together. And I think we're going to need some divine suggestions as to make some of those decisions, right? We want to do some innovations. What ideas are the same and which are different? Where do we find joy? In a loving relationships, we also want to give joy to each other. Right? It's not all about me, because if I have what I want but you don't, that's not the relationship I want to have with my beloved, right? And so we're finding that it does help to, what are our priorities? What are we going to do first, right? So we're finding that it helps to call spirit into the room before we start talking. And it also helps if we get clear within ourselves about what we really want and what is and is not important to us. As some of the discussions we've had, I've assumed that this was really important to you, but it turns out not to be. So it wasn't an issue at all, and I was really getting worried about it, but maybe it's not. And on the other hand, something that I thought wasn't important really is. So we need to have that conversation. It's amazing to see how spirit opens up new ideas as we work in the we space rather than my space or your space, right? So pulling all of this together, as we dance our lives, we can be inspired by blessed wisdom traditions of others, such as Ramadan. We can choose to admire and honor the teachings of Islam and the Muslims that are celebrating Ramadan. We can show that by fasting from negative and limiting habits and false beliefs ourselves, and turn away from the thoughts, judgments, and fears that have kept us separate from God or from other people, our prejudices, right? Passover. We can choose to stay aligned with our divine inner guide and then leave behind those ways of thinking that no longer serve us, right? Now, when we celebrate Palm Sunday and remember Jesus riding into Jerusalem, the habitation of peace, remember that Jesus rode with a sense of peace and calm rather than fighting what was. He was practicing non-resistance. He focused on the inner, unlimited reservoir of strength, the power and presence of God within him that's always there, always reliable. And so when we are faced with challenges, struggles, or loss, we can hold ourselves in love, gentleness, and compassion, just as Spirit is doing. We can look for people that remind us that we are supported by that unlimited inner reservoir of peace, of strength, and love. Remind ourselves that we are on our sacred path, that all people are on a sacred path, maybe in different places, but we are all together as one. So like the donkey, slow down, connect with your inner guide, discern what is your best path, and then move forward with trust and care. We can learn to dance with that donkey. We can follow the divine path beyond our limitations to freedom. Freedom to live a life filled with all the good, all the love, and all the health and happiness that the infinite invisible would shower upon us. It is more than we could ever hope for it is the infinite invisible that is loving us and living itself as us, in and through and as us in our lives. Let's take this to prayer. And so as we go within, we find the warm, loving arms of Spirit ready to greet us. And we settle down and let go and let God guide us in this moment. And so all the fears, the unfulfilled hopes and expectations, the limitations that we have set for ourselves, knowingly or unknowingly, we set them all down. And in the stillness, we take the time, just like the donkey, to assess where we're at, to remember who we are, to remember that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience on earth. And so we go to that wholeness and inner strength and wisdom and inner calm peace that is the truth of who we are. We go to that knowingness that our relationships are part of the divine loving itself, sharing life with itself. And there is within us, as in all people, that divine expression. And so we unite with it. We call it forward. We allow our divine inner guide to come out, to be the truth of who we are. And as we do, we find that what has been limiting us now falls away. And in its place, there is this clarity, there is this vision of a path forward. And we find ourselves hand in hand, arm in arm with people around us. We find ourselves supported by that inner power and presence of God within us and in all places and in all things. And so we step into the unknown, knowing that each step of the way our guide is with us, that we are supported in all ways, and it is good. We know joy, unlimited joy. We know peace. We know fulfillment. We, in ways that we had never even known were possible. For we are on the sacred path of life unfolding in all of its wonder and grandeur, creating a world that works for everyone, in our immediate family, in our community here at the Center for Spiritual Living, Tahoe-Truckee, in our greater community, and all of the lives that are touched by our activities here as the center, whether it is here in the center in physical activities, whether it's online or something that gets passed on from one person to the next and ripples forward, and in all corners of the earth. We know and see that divine peace that is everywhere present. And we know that there is no power greater than that infinite, divine, loving presence. And so we learn to be peace. We stand up for peace. We live peace. We are peace in our own lives and everywhere. It becomes the truth of the land, of the earth, of our existence. And it is coming through, determined to know that this is the truth. This is the only lasting strength, these qualities of God, of love and peace and joy. It is here. We see it, we feel it, and we know it. And we accept it. We stand firm as we stand tall. We listen to what we are called to do in our lives, to stand for peace, to stand for love, to stand for wholeness, manifesting everywhere in the world. And it is good. We thank you, Father, Mother, God, for this moment of clarity, for this life of joy and wonder, for the loving presence of Spirit within us and around us and in all things. And it is good. And so it is. And so we let it be. Amen.